Today on Audiobooks Empowerment we present The Secrets of Mental Superiority by William Richard Latson. Introduction. My mind, to me, is a kingdom. Epictetus. The mind is the measure of man. Watts. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Jesus. The man does not contain the mind contains the man. Socrates. In the universe there is nothing great except man. In man there is nothing great except mind. Aristotle. In the brief articles which will compose this series, my aim will be to present in the briefest, simplest and most practical manner the methods which, in my experience and that of many others who have been more or less under my influence, have seemed to lead to greater mental efficiency. It is said that there is no royal road to learning, and while in a certain sense this is true, it is also true that in all things, even in the training of the mind, there is a right way and a wrong way, or rather, there is one right way and 1,000 wrong ways. Now, after trying, it seems to me most of the wrong paths, I have found what I believe to be the right path, and in these articles I will try to lay it out for you. Do not expect an essay on psychology or a series of dissertations on the faculties of the mind, for there will be none of that. On the other hand, I will avoid as much as possible textbook terms and textbook tone, both of which are quite absurd and useless. I will try to lay out for you the facts and try to give you clear instructions, stripped of all verbiage and pseudo-scientific frivolity, for the acquisition of mental activity and mental supremacy. Chapter 1. The Mind and its Matter. In the first place, before one is able to think, one must have something to think about. You must have some stock in mental commerce, and this mental stock in commerce can only be obtained through the senses. The appearance of a tree, the roar of the ocean, the smell of a rose, the taste of an orange, the sensation you experience when you touch a piece of satin. All this is material that helps to form your stock of mental images, the content of consciousness, as the scholastic psychologists call it. Now, all these millions and millions of facts that form our mental stock, the material of thought, are obtained through the senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch, etc. Value of perceptions. In a recent article published in an important French scientific journal, a well-known scientist, Dr. A. Perez, has put forward some ideas which agree so fully with my own observations made over many years that I yield to the temptation to quote them. Dr. Perez points out, first of all, the modern degeneration in this respect. I enclose a free translation of some extracts which seem to me particularly worthy of attention. We have but arms and legs. Have we not also eyes and ears? And are not the latter organs necessary for the use of the former? Exercised muscles, but also the senses that control them. Thus a celebrated philosopher used to express himself. However, when we measure the sharpness of sight, we find that it weakens. The hardness of hearing increases. We suffer daily from the lack of ability of the workers, of the domestics, of ourselves. As for taste and smell, they are exhausted. Thus act the inevitable laws of atavism. The trouble is that despite Rousseau's objections, we have always paid too little attention to the hygiene and education of the senses, giving all our care to the development of physical strength and vigor, so that the general term physical education has finally assumed the restricted meaning of muscular education. The senses which bring us into contact with external objects are, however, of paramount importance. So great is their value that it is man's interest and even duty to preserve them as a treasure and to do nothing that would upset their wonderful mechanism. The length and accuracy of sight, the dexterity and sureness of the hand, the delicacy of hearing are of value to the artist as well as to the craftsman, because of the perfection and rapidity of the work which they ensure. Nothing embarrasses a man so trained. He is, so to speak, prepared for everything. His cultivated senses have become for him tools of universal use. The more perfect his sensations are, the more justice and clarity his ideas acquire. The education of the senses is the first form of intellectual education. The influence of the training of the senses is easy to see. The skilled marksman never misses his aim. The savage perceives and recognizes the slightest rustle. Certain blind men know colors by touch. The precision of jugglers is astonishing. The gourmet recognizes the quality of a wine among 1,000 others. Smell is for chemists one of the most sensitive reactions. The senses operate in two ways: passively, when the organ, by the mere fact of being situated on the surface of the body and independently of the will, is actuated by external bodies, or actively, when the organ, directed and excited by the will, goes, as it were, ahead of the body to receive the impression. Passively, we see, hear, touch, smell. Actively, we observe, we listen, we feel, we smell. By disposing our attention and arranging our organs in certain ways, our impressions become more intense. The impressions that external objects produce in the sense organs, the nerves and the brain, are followed by certain mental operations. These two things are often confused. We are in the habit of saying that our senses deceive us. It would often be better to recognize that we do not always interpret correctly the data they give us. The art of interpretation can be learned. The intuitive and concrete form given today to education contributes to the training of the senses, developing attention and the habit of observation. But this is not enough to perfect the senses and to make each of them, in its own perceptions, acquire all possible strength and precision. It is necessary to subject it to special, appropriate and graduated exercises. A new gymnastics must thus be created in all its details. There are, of course, a certain number of specific or racial impressions and tendencies which are transmitted through what is called heredity. But these are merely instincts and impulses, and although they have an influence on the character and habits of thought of the person, they do not in themselves provide real material for thought. Imagine a blind and deaf person who could not smell, taste, feel, or move. He would be totally unable to think because he would have nothing in his mind to think about. The material of thought, the mental stock in trade, is obtained through the senses, and in any rational effort to train the mind, we must begin by training the senses, the perceptions, as they are more accurately called, so that we can see, hear, smell, taste and feel more accurately and acutely. Trained perceptions are the very basis of all mental power. Our system of training for mental supremacy will therefore begin with a brief study of the perceptions or senses and of the methods by which we may acquire the power to see more clearly, to hear more attentively, to feel more delicately, and, in general, to develop the powers. But perceptions are of little value unless we remember what we have perceived. You may have read all the wise books ever written. You may have traveled all over the world. You may have had all sorts of interesting and unusual experiences, but unless you can remember what you have read, what you have seen, and what you have done, you will have no real use for it all. You will have gained no mental capital, no material by the use of which you can hope to attain mental supremacy. It will be necessary, then, that we study not only the methods of developing the power of perception, but the means by which perception can be retained and recalled at will, the power of associating memories. But memory itself is not enough. I have known people with unusual powers of memory who could not speak, write, or think well, who were like the imbecile full of books, ignoramuses read with a lot of erudite humor in their heads, but who, in spite of all their experience and their recollection of it, had nothing to write, nothing to say. So memory is not enough. One must have the power to unite memories, to analyze, compare, contrast and associate them until the whole mass of memories that form the content of consciousness is a splendid and homogeneous whole, a mass of images, each of which is intimately related to many others, and all of which are under the instantaneous command of the central sovereign, the will. It will be necessary, then, to pay special attention to this all-important matter of analyzing, comparing, and grouping mental images. Of all the activities of the mind, this faculty, called the power of association, is the one which most directly leads to what is generally called a brilliant mind, imagination, and judgment. The possession of trained perceptions, of a retentive memory, and of great powers of association are of enormous value, but only when combined with another faculty, the imagination. And imagination is nothing more than the power to recombine certain memories in such a way that the combination is new. Imagination is a faculty of the greatest possible importance. Every splendid thing, every invention, every commercial enterprise, every great poem, book, or picture has not only been conceived, but completed in the imagination before it became a reality in fact. Then it is necessary to be able to compare the mental images gathered by perceptions, recalled and classified by memory and association, in order to determine the relation of these memories to each other and their application to other ideas or mental images. Judgment, need for concentration. Now, to do any of the things I have been writing about well, it is necessary that the whole mind be occupied with that one thing. To do anything well, one must do only that one thing at that moment, and this is particularly true of the action of the mind. The focusing of the whole power of the mind on one thing is commonly known as concentration, or the power of attention. So essential is this power of concentrating the whole mind on the task at hand that it is no exaggeration to say that no great degree of mental power can be obtained without concentration. Therefore, in our study of the practical methods by which mental supremacy may be achieved, we shall give special attention to the development of this invaluable faculty. But to do anything with the mind, or with the body for that matter, one must choose, one must desire to do that thing, and this choice, this decision to do something, is called will. The power to choose quickly and decisively, and to act energetically in accordance with that choice, is something quite rare. He who has that power is said to have a strong will. This question of the will and its development is very important. The great difference between men, between strong men and weak men, between the honored and the despised, between masters and servants, is the will. A man of strong and unbreakable will is sure to succeed, even if his abilities are mediocre. But a weak-willed man, no matter what his abilities, is not likely to achieve either success or honor among men. As a great psychologist has said, the education of the will is really of far greater importance than that of the intellect, and also without this will there can be neither independence nor firmness nor individuality of character. Ig Marvel says, "Resolution is what makes a man manifest, will makes giants of men." The will, like any other mental faculty, can be highly developed by training, and this, with many practical exercises, we shall also deal with in its proper place. Importance of the social faculties. The above brief description of the mental faculties covers those which any person can develop and use without help or association with other people. However, the higher mental faculties, or at any rate the more impressive ones, can only be developed through contact with others, through social relationships. A man may have miraculously acute perceptions, a perfect memory, a splendid imagination, an unerring judgment, an indomitable will. He may have all this, and yet he would miss the rewards of mental supremacy unless he were able to deal with other people, unless he were socially accomplished. In our efforts to train the powers of the mind, therefore, it will be necessary to make a study of some of the principles which affect our relations with other people, and so, in the same practical and direct way, we shall discuss sympathy, adaptability, and self-control. The important question of verbal expression, as applied to both speech and writing, will also receive special attention. Mental action as unity. In conclusion, it should not be forgotten that, although I speak of the various mental acts as if they were separate, this is done only for convenience of discussion and description. In fact, the mind is one thing, a unity. All the various faculties are constantly acting together. One cannot remember what an oak tree looks like unless one has carefully observed an oak tree. He cannot imagine an oak tree unless he remembers it. He cannot judge the difference between an oak tree and a maple tree unless he can picture an image of the two side by side, and he cannot do any of these things without attention. Nor can he concentrate his attention without an act of will. We see then that the various acts of the mind perception, memory, imagination, judgment, attention, and will are inextricably interdependent, and that one act implies all the others. Fortunately, this makes our task easier and more interesting. In this series, I will begin by giving you some practical tips for developing the perceptual faculties, the ability to see, hear, feel, taste and smell more effectively. But with each moment of practice like the one I am advising you, you will also be developing a more accurate and acute memory, a finer and more expansive imagination, a greater concentration of power, and a stronger will. When we come to discuss the cultivation of willpower, the exercises will require the use of perceptions, memory, imagination, and other faculties. Therefore, by developing the mind in any of the phases of its activity, the power and usefulness of the whole mind is increased at the same time and by the same act. Chapter 2. Training the perceptive faculties. Man is the eyes of things. Hindu proverb. That clairvoyant genius Goethe once said that he regarded himself as the center of all phenomena, a kind of focus toward which they converged. Goethe also claimed that the true pattern of all things in life was simply the mass of actions appreciable by the human senses. In other words, Goethe understood perfectly well the educational principle, now widely recognized and widely ignored, that all mental activity is based on perceptions, on the things we see, hear, feel, taste, and smell. We might as well try to build a house without wood, bricks, stone, or mortar, as we might try to think without a good stock of impressions, images, and memories gathered by the senses and perceptions. Blurred mental images. One of the never-failing marks of the common mind, the untrained and inefficient mind, is that the mental images it contains are confused, blurred, inaccurate. A person with such a mind will tell you that a car just passed him on the road. It was a big red car. You will ask him, because he doesn't know very well, it may have been red, but he thinks it was black, possibly it was grey. How many people were in it? I think 3, 4, or 5. Ask him to give you a summary of a book he's read, or a play he's seen, and he'll feel just as helpless, and so on and so forth. Such a person is the typical inefficient person. You will find thousands of such inefficients occupying unimportant positions in stores and offices, and even the trivial tasks of such positions they are incapable of performing properly. They cannot read a line of shorthand notes and be sure of their meaning. They cannot add up a column of figures and be sure of the result without repeated checks. Such wretches are the cast-offs of the commercial world, the unfit who, in the struggle for existence, must necessarily be displaced by those whose mental processes are more positive and accurate. It is almost unbelievable to what extent perceptions can develop. I personally know a bank teller who can detect a counterfeit coin without looking at it, judging only by weight, touch, and sound. Another man I know earns a large salary simply because of his ability to judge tea through its taste, a tea taster. I know a conductor who, in the very full forte of his 60-piece band, detects a slight error by any player. I could give many other examples from my own experience of remarkable powers of trained perception. Perceptions are easily trained. To encourage those who are aware that they do not get the best possible service from their senses and perceptions, that they do not see all there is to see, hear accurately and clearly, etc., for their benefit, I may say at once that senses and perceptions are easily trained. 1 or 2 months of discipline, such as I am about to describe, will show a very marked and gratifying development in most cases. A few months' training is all that is needed, because the habit of close observation is soon formed, and once formed, no further thought is necessary. The matter resolves itself. Children's perceptions. First, a word about the senses and perceptions of children. Here is one of the serious defects of our defective school system. It practically ignores the fact that the child develops not through reasoning, but through observation and activity. The child observes everything, his senses are active and acute. Childhood is the time of accumulating observations and experiences that will later form the material for thinking and general development. The child must be encouraged to perceive and remember. All the methods I am going to describe are applicable to children under 10 years of age. The more elaborate and extensive the mass of perceptions and memories that the child carries over from infancy and childhood into youth and adulthood, the greater, other things being equal, will be his intellectual possibilities. Most of us. We are starved for sensations. Most of us are very deficient in mental imagery. In a test conducted not long ago in Boston, 80% of the children had no idea what a beehive looked like. More than half had no idea of a sheep, and more than 9/10 had no idea of the appearance or nature of growing wheat. Of course, they knew other things that the country-bred child would not know. But imagine the loss in the imagination of one to whom the following lines arouse no vision of a pure and rustic morning scene. The call of the incense-breathing morning breeze, the twitter of the swallow from the thatched shed, the shrill bugle of the cock, or the echo of the horn will no longer rouse them from their humble bed. The great secret of a true development of perceptions is discrimination, the understanding of differences. To the savage, a sound is a sound. To the musician, it is unbearable discord or exquisite harmony. To the musician, a small depression in the ground, a bent branch, a crooked leaf are nothing. To the savage, they mean food, an enemy, safety, or danger. On the printed pages, the unlettered rustic sees only silly black marks on white paper, but in those black marks the educated man sees what makes his heart beat faster, his eyes water, what tells him secrets of life that the peasant will never know. The differences are in the trained or untrained perceptions. Most of the exercises I am about to describe are simple, many may seem trivial. But remember, as a great educator has said, the point in education is the power of attending to things which may be in themselves indifferent, arousing an artificial feeling of interest. So the first exercise is simple enough, simple but not easy. Try it and you will see. Take any object you want, a book, a pen, a pair of scissors. Place it on the table in front of you, then take pencil and paper and describe it. Just tell what you see. Can you do it? I doubt it. Tell us its dimensions, its weight, its color, its shape, its markings, its lettering, its origin, its uses, its possibilities, its defects. See to what extent you can write on the object. It is likely that you will not like the result. You will discover that you have nowhere near the capacity for expression you thought you had. With practice, your faculties will grow rapidly. You can do the same outdoors. Look at a mountain peak, the ocean, a horse, a bird. If you think for a moment that there is nothing to write about these things, read the poem in The Valley of Chuni, the splendid passage in Byron that begins, "Roll deep and dark, blue ocean, roll," the magnificent poem in the book of Job describing the horse, Shelley's The Skylark, etc. James Whitcomb. Riley has said, "There is always a song somewhere, my child, and to find the material for the song it is only necessary to look with a refined and educated perception, to look trying to see all the various sides, all the many phases of the object looked at. In the same way, one must also study many other natural objects, autumnal dyes, frost marks, snowflakes, trees, both their general shape and that of their leaves, all the common flowers. Finally, and in many ways most important in practice, get used to observing the human face closely. Try to recognize and discriminate the signs of education, refinement, intellect in the face, distinguishing it from the stigmata of ignorance, coarseness, and brutality. Another good exercise for eye training is the following. Get a number of ordinary marbles, say 3 dozen, 1 dozen of each, red, white, and blue. Mix them in a container. Now take a handful of marbles, take a look at them, and throw them away again. Then write down how many of each color were in your hand. You will find this difficult at first. In a short time, however, you will be able to distinguish at a glance between, say, 3 red, 5 white, and 7 blue, and 3 red, 6 white, and 6 blue, with a corresponding development of the faculties of perception in all other directions. A very simple and very good exercise for the development of the faculty of sight is as follows. Get a dozen white poster boards about 3 inches by 5 inches in size. Then, with a small brush or a pen, draw on each of them a series of small black circles. The circles should be solid black, about 1/4 inch in diameter. On the first card draw 1, on the second 2, and so on until the last one, where you will make 12, grouping them as much as possible, forming a circle. Now, to use them, put the cards face down and shuffle. Then, take the top one, take a brief look at it, and try to perceive how many black circles are on it. Don't try to count during your brief glance. Don't squint, frown, or strain your eyes. Just take a look, and then try to remember and count what you saw. You may find it difficult at first to distinguish between 5 circles and 6. However, after a while, you will be able to instantly decide on any number of circles up to 15, 20, or even more. Train the ear to hear. Few people can hear. Of most, it could well be said that they hear and do not hear. I do not mean to say that in most people the organ of hearing is defective in any way, but that, as a result of inattention and lack of practice, they do not get clear and vivid impressions of the sounds impinging on their auditory apparatus. One of the best methods of training the auditory faculty is to listen attentively to the various sounds of the countryside, the buzzing of insects, the cry of the robin, the thrush, the catbird, the blackbird, the swallow. All these and many other sounds peculiar to the countryside should be carefully studied. The sounds peculiar to city life are less picturesque and, in a sense, less varied than those of the countryside. However, if we speak only of musical advantages, the city offers material for splendid auditory training: concerts, opera, social music, the phonograph. Even the hand organs of the street offer opportunities for ear training. These opportunities can be taken advantage of in a number of ways. One of the best and most practical, perhaps, is to routinely require us to know the melody of popular selections. How many people who are not musical know the melody of the soldier's chorus from Faust, the bullfighter's song from Carmen, or the overture to Tannhäuser? And yet these are things we hear every day on street organs. A very good exercise for the development of the auditory faculty is simply to listen to the ticking of a clock. One method I have found very practical and useful is as follows. Place the clock on the table at which you are sitting. Now turn your left ear toward it. Do you hear it? Yes, clearly. Move 1 foot, 2 feet, 3, 4 feet away from the table. Can you hear the clock? Yes. Now increase the distance foot by foot until you can no longer hear the clock. Now listen, listen, listen. Concentrate your attention on the sound until out of silence or a confusion of sounds comes to you, the clear, rhythmic ticking of the little mechanism. All this time you will be sitting with your left ear turned towards the clock. The same practice should be done, of course, with the right ear. This exercise is valuable not only for cultivating the power of hearing, but also for developing concentration of attention and will. It is simply another phase of the same method by which a conductor may, at will, select one instrument from a band and listen to that one only, to the exclusion of any other piece. Sense of smell training. We often hear it said that, as an animal, man is inferior to the beasts of the field. But like many other things we hear, this is not true, at least not to a certain extent. The truth is that simply as an animal, man is the masterpiece of creation. In actual strength, endurance, grace and speed of movement, the best physical types of men compare favorably with any other animal of the same size and weight. This is a biological fact. But in one respect at least it is clearly inferior, and that is in regard to the sense of smell. There are very few animals that are not better equipped than man in this respect. For this inferiority, there are many reasons which we cannot discuss in this place. I may point out, however, that in some people the sense of smell is developed to a surprising degree. I once knew a well-born and highly educated woman who, blindfolded, could name any of her friends who came within 3 feet of her. The same woman was also able to determine by scent the owner of items belonging to those she knew well. I know another woman who can distinguish copper, brass, steel and iron by their taste and smell. I may add that what we call taste is also largely smell. The achievements of tea, coffee, tobacco and whiskey experts depend largely on the delicacy of the sense of smell. A good method of training this sense is as follows. Get several small cardboard or wooden boxes, such as those used by pharmacists, to dispense pills or tablets. Any drugstore will provide them for little money. Then put in each box a small amount of one of the following substances: cinnamon, cloves, red pepper, mustard, black pepper, ginger. Half a dozen boxes are enough, selecting for them the mentioned substances that are most easily available to practice this method. It is enough to close your eyes, open a box at random, and try to determine which substance it is by smell. This method can be varied by having several small jars, each containing one of the fragrant oils, such as clove oil, wintergreen, lemon, verbena, lavender, peppermint, bergamot, nutmeg, and so on. It is also a good plan to take careful note of the distinctive odor of the various fragrant flowers so that they can later be recognized by the perfume that is peculiar to each one. Taste training. There are really only 4 tastes: sweet, sour, bitter, bitter, and salty. As I have just pointed out, what we call taste is largely smell or flavor. The best way to develop the delicacy of the sense of taste is to eat very simple foods and put very little or no seasoning on them in the form of salt, sugar, mustard, pepper, vinegar, or other condiment. Then, and only then, will one be able to appreciate the true taste of the food. No one, for example, who is in the habit of using pepper and other seasonings can really taste a strawberry. In conclusion, I want to emphasize 2 things. First, that a training of the perceptive faculties is the best possible investment one can make, even considering the matter from its lowest monetary point of view. Secondly, that the exercises I have suggested in this chapter, though they may seem very simple, almost trivial, will, in all cases where they are seriously practiced, add immensely not only to the powers of perception, but to the practical efficiency of all the faculties of the mind. Chapter 3. Memory and how to develop it. Memory is the accumulated genius. James Russell Lowell. Memory is the permanence of perception. Latson. The value of any man to himself and to the world at large depends largely upon his memory, upon his ability to recall and use at any desired time the memory of what he has seen, heard, experienced, or thought. Memory is really the basis of our mental life. Our perceptions bring us a vast mass of experiences, things we have seen, heard, touched, tasted and smelled, our thoughts and experiences. But these things are only valuable when they are preserved in memory. If they are not remembered, they cannot be used. Most of us have lived much more than we remember. We have studied at school, at university, at home. We have read many, many books, had many interesting and instructive conversations. Some of us have traveled and seen many strange and curious things. And of all this, how much do we possess at the moment? How much do we have at our disposal? Not a tenth, probably not even a hundredth. Imagine the enormous loss it would mean for us. Imagine the loss of time and effort. Imagine what it would mean to you or to me if, instead of possessing a memory that preserved for us only 1/100th part of our experiences, we could recall and apply at will half, 3/4, 4/5 of what we have lived through. But that is impossible, you will say. Allow me to contradict you. There have been many cases of the power of remembrance that prove the contrary. The most striking was that of Antonio Magliabechi, who lived in Italy in the 17th century. From being a simple servant, he rose to become the librarian of Cosmo III, the Grand Duke of Tuscany. Magliabeci's memory was prodigious. Nothing he had seen, heard or experienced escaped him. It is said that after a reading he could repeat verbatim any book in his patron's library, which at the time possessed one of the greatest collections of the time. Impossible, you will say. Not at all. I know a man who can neither read nor write except to sign his name. He is an Irishman who began his life in this country with a pick and shovel. Today he is a rich and powerful man financially and politically. He is a contractor, a real estate operator, a stock speculator, and is interested in other lines of business. He keeps no books and employs no accountants. All his values, dates and figures are in his head, and at any time he can tell exactly where he stands with any of his partners. Among the ancient Greeks, it was not uncommon to find a learned patrician capable of reciting verbatim the complete poems of Homer, the Iliad, and the Odyssey. Cyrus the Great could call by name any man in his army, which numbered 1,000,000 soldiers. Napoleon had almost equally remarkable powers of memory. Gladstone, when presenting to Parliament his annual budget, would talk for several hours presenting monetary details amounting to many millions of pounds without a glance at the written report on his table. Robert G. Ingersoll, that great jurist and brilliant orator, would attend a trial lasting many days without taking notes. Yet in his speeches to the jury, which sometimes lasted many hours, he never forgot or overlooked any point of the opposition. And so I could go on. Scott, Milton, Shakespeare, Washington, Clay, Webster, all of them were noted for their power of memory. In fact, it may be stated that all men who have attained a prominent place among men have possessed a retentive and accurate memory. So we can see that, as an asset in practical life, whether one's ambition be literary, artistic, scientific, or simply the transfer of dollars from someone's pocket to one's own, as a practical asset, the power of memory is of the highest conceivable value. A good memory will give you an incalculable advantage over others, an advantage that no other mental qualification can balance. Memory training is not difficult. The mind is like the potter's clay. It is easily molded, and there is no direction in which development is so easy as in the memory department. Even a few days' practice along the lines I am about to suggest will generally make a noticeable difference, and 2 or 3 months of conscientious training will often suffice to metamorphose a poor, weak and inaccurate memory into one that is tenacious and reliable. The nature of memory. In the introductory article of this series, I promised you that I would not be theoretical or descriptive, but would make these chapters purely practical. I now intend to keep my word, but in order to make what follows more intelligible and useful, it will be well here to pause for a moment and make a few brief statements as to the nature of memory. In the first place, may I say at once that there is really no such thing as memory. This sounds a lot like old-fashioned Irish bull, but it is nothing more than a statement of sober fact. There is no memory. There are only memories. When I say this, I am not simply juggling terms. The difference is important and fundamental. What I mean is this: memory is not, as we were taught many years ago, a faculty of the soul, a small section of the brain that must develop on its own. Not at all. Memory is merely a term used to describe the way certain acts or thoughts tend to remain in the mind, and each act or thought has its own little memory. Some acts or thoughts we remember with ease, others with difficulty, if at all. If someone were to describe to me the details of a case of insanity symptoms, history, treatment, I would remember it for a long time because, as a physician, I am interested in psychiatry. But although a day or two ago I listened patiently to a long account of the Wall Street adventures of an acquaintance of mine, I am quite sure that I could not give an intelligent account of it because I know little and am less interested in such matters. Similarly, some people have a good memory for names but cannot remember faces. Others can remember dates but have no ability to remember names, and so on. The point is this: we remember best the things we are most interested in, with which we are most familiar. The small recollection of any act or thought may or may not remain in the mind. Whether it is remembered or not depends mainly on how much attention we have paid to that act or thought at the time it occurred. Therefore, if we wish to have a good power of memory, if we wish to have a large number of clear and vivid recollections, all under our instantaneous control, it is essential that we give to what we wish to remember strict attention and careful study. And this is really the great secret of what is called good memory. In other words, a memory is simply a permanence, a recurrence of a perception, and that memory is clear and complete just in proportion as the perception was clear and complete. If in introducing myself to a stranger I barely look at his face and pay little or no attention to the name, I am not likely to remember either the man or the name. If, on the other hand, I look at him closely and pay attention to the name, I am likely to remember him, perhaps for years. I myself am often introduced to 25 or 30 strangers in the course of an evening, and I am usually able to remember all or nearly all of their names and faces afterwards. This is nothing more than the result of a habit of paying attention to the subject. Now then, on the basis of the principle we have just discussed, we can formulate our first rule for the development of memory. Study the object you wish to remember in all its phases, in all its peculiarities, in all its relations. For the moment, put all other thoughts out of your mind. Make the object part of you, and you will never forget it. I say object, but I mean, of course, anything, fact, figure, idea, principle or plan, to all of which the same rule applies. So much for the rule, but you would like to know exactly how to apply this rule to practical development. Well, one of the best ways I know is the following. You are walking down the street. A carriage passes by to which you have cast a casual glance. When it has passed, ask yourself about it. What kind of carriage was it? A landau, a buggy, a bouga, or what? What color were the wheels? Did they have rubber tires? How many horses were there? What color were they? Was the coachman black or white? The livery, if there was one? How many occupants were there, men or women? How were they dressed? Do you remember all their faces so that if you saw them again you would recognize them? And so on. When you have conscientiously done this a dozen times, you will be surprised and delighted at the improvement in your ability to both perceive and remember, because, as I cannot reiterate too often, the two, perception and memory, are practically one. Well, after going through the carriage and getting all the educational benefit you can out of the experience, you will come to a shop window, the window of a toy store, let's say. Don't stop to look at the window, that will only confuse you. Take a look and walk past it. Then ask yourself what you saw in the window. If possible, have a notebook and pencil and write down each item as you remember it. This is the method employed by the famous conjurer Robert Houdin, a method by which he trained his memory and that of his young son to the point that they were able to recall over 30,000 questions and answers that formed the code for his famous second sight act. Another valuable method of training the memory is to make it a rule that every night, before or after going to bed, to review in detail the events of the day. This was the method employed by the great Edward Thurlow, Lord High Chancellor of Great Britain. At first his memory was so poor that he was unable to recall what he had had for breakfast. In time, however, he developed one of the most remarkable memories on record. I know of several cases in which this method has proved to be of great use. Another very simple and convenient method, but at the same time very useful for cultivating the power of memory, is the following. Take some interesting book, such as a historical work or some attractive novel. Read a paragraph slowly and attentively. Then close the book and repeat aloud the contents of the section you have just read. Do not try to repeat the passage word for word. Just convey the meaning as you remember it. It doesn't matter whether you repeat the author's words or your own. After your first attempt, which will probably not be a resounding success, reread the paragraph and make a second effort to remember and express its general meaning. When you have learned this paragraph fairly well, move on to the next, and so on until you reach the last paragraph on the page. Then take that page as homework and review it. Take the chapter in its entirety and repeat it as completely and accurately as you can. This sounds like hard work, and it is at first, but it soon becomes interesting, especially when you begin to discover that, although at first you were unable to give a clear idea of a paragraph you had just read, you are soon able to remember and clearly express the meaning of a whole chapter without great effort or difficulty. This exercise trains not only the memory, but also the perceptions, the will, and the powers of expression. As far as I know, it was invented by Henry Clay in his early days as a farmer, and he often cited it as the method which had contributed most to the development of his prodigious memory and splendid oratorical ability. A valuable variant of the above exercise is to write at length, rather than attempt to express in spoken words what one remembers of the paragraph, page, or chapter. For those who desire a further development, a development of the power of expression in writing as well as speaking, I suggest that you practice this exercise by speaking and writing your recollections of the passage. When you have gone through a book in this way, speaking certain passages and writing others, you will not only know that book in a way that few people ever know, but you will have developed additional powers of attention, willpower, memory, and expression that will be to you a surprise and a delight. The pictorial faculty. One of the chief secrets of memory is to develop the ability to recall before the mind an image of the desired object, a vivid recollection of its appearance. When I was a schoolboy, I found that it did me no good to study either the spelling lesson or the geography lesson. All I needed was to run my eye slowly over the list of spelling words and look at the map of the particular section we were studying. After that, I could have before me a clear picture of whatever word was called for or whatever section of the map covered our lesson. In questioning musicians who are able to play long passages from memory on the piano or violin, I find that in most cases they remember what the music page looks like and follow the notes as if they had the actual page in front of them. This power of visualizing memories has developed in some people to a surprising degree. The memorable achievements of Houdini and Magliabechi, as well as other prodigies such as the mathematical marvel Zera Colburn and his prototype Jacob Sinodi, the memory feats of these depend largely, in some cases entirely, on the faculty of visualization. What is the best method for developing this power of visual memory? There are several very simple and valuable methods. First, try the following. Write in clear handwriting a list of words in column form. The list should contain no more than 6 words at first. Later, it can be expanded to 20 or even 30. Now, place your 6-word list in front of you and look at it for a moment. Do not stare or strain your eyes. Do not try to remember the words yet. This is the moment of observation, of fixing on the photographic plate of your mind a clear image memory of the word list. After a moment of staring, cover the paper and try to remember exactly what the words were and what they looked like. You may find it difficult at first. Soon you will find it easy to remember 6 words by moving both up and down the column. Then gradually increase the number until you can remember at least 25. A useful variation of this exercise is to use figures instead of words, placing them at first in the form of a square of 4 figures and calling out each one as you remember its position. Again, as soon as 4 come easily to him, increase the number of figures by 2 until he can retain, after a single glance, a clear picture of 36 or more figures. I knew a 12-year-old boy who was able to remember 64 figures, a square 8 figures up and 8 across. If asked, he could say the first line of figures forward, the third line of figures backward, the line of units downward, and so on. In other words, this boy could see in his mind's eye a mental picture of those 64 figures that was absolutely as clear as the original had been to the physical eye. I might add that the boy I refer to was by no means exceptional, except that he had taken an interest in the tricks I taught him and his companions. They are all now men of remarkable memory. Chapter 4. Association of Ideas. Of all the operations of the mind, that which most directly leads to mental preparation is the power of associating or grouping ideas. The man or woman in whom the power of association is well developed has a mind that may be compared to a vast skein of threads. Each thread represents an idea, and of these thread ideas, all that are related are grouped together like many threads tied in a knot, so that if you touch one of the thread ideas, you are instantly in communication with the whole group. When the ideas are grouped or associated in this orderly manner, any thought that comes to mind will instantly suggest a large number of related thoughts. This means an active, efficient, and often brilliant mind. Now, let us understand at once that what is commonly called education, that is, a mere knowledge of facts, however extensive, does not necessarily confer the power of associating or grouping ideas in such a way that they are readily available for speaking, writing, or thinking. Indeed, I have known men of great erudition who could not speak well, who could not write well, who could not even think well. A well-stored mind, that is, mere scholarship, although it can only be acquired by an individual with a good memory, does not necessarily imply the power of association. He who possesses an unusual power of associating ideas is always interesting, often brilliant. His ideas are, as I have said, like knotted threads. Every idea suggested to him evokes in his mind many related ideas. In the mind of a merely scholarly man, for example, the mention of the word horse will arouse few, if any, mental images. In the mind of the person who has the power of association, however, the idea of horse awakens a large number of interesting thoughts. There is the horse so magnificently described in the biblical poem of Job. There is the famous Bucephalus horse, the war steed of Alexander the Great, which only he could ride. The person with a great power of association remembers also the wonderful Kanthaka horse, ridden by Gautama the Buddha. Then he thinks of the horse of Darius, which, neighing at the critical moment, caused its master to be elected king of Persia, Darius the Great. He recalls the story of the great wooden horse in whose interior the Greek soldiers were smuggled into Troy until the fall of that city. And finally, the man with trained powers of association will be able to tell you something of the interesting history of the horse, both before and after it was first tamed and ridden many thousands of years ago by Melus, king of Thessaly. And so on with any other subject you propose to him. In the mind of such a person, every idea is intimately associated with many other more or less related ideas. And even if his actual store of information is small, his mental images are so closely connected and so quickly remembered that the practice of science and technology is so important to him. In the mind of such a person, each idea is intimately associated with many other more or less related ideas. And although his actual store of information may be small, his mental images are so closely connected and so quickly remembered that the practical power and usefulness of his mind are greater than in the case of another person with a larger store of knowledge and a lower power of association. Another great advantage of a well-developed power of association is that it almost prevents forgetfulness. As I have explained in the chapter on memory training, what we fully understand, we do not forget. Now, the complete understanding of any idea is simply the result of a process of making that idea the center of a mass of associations. If you were to leave your boat in a stream with a very swift current, you would tie the boat to the shore not just with one rope, but with several ropes strung at different points on each side of the stream. And the more ropes you tie to the boat, and the more directions they extend in, the less likely it is that your boat will slip away, and the more easily you will be able to retrieve it at will. The same principle applies to ideas. Each associative relationship is like a little thread that ties a particular idea to another idea, and when we tie that particular idea to many other ideas, we are assured first that we will not forget it, and second, that when any of the ideas with which we have associated the new idea come to mind, the new idea will be immediately drawn to mind. All this being true, we shall be prepared to appreciate the following important statement. It is necessary to have in the mind a large number of ideas. This can only be done by perception and memory, but it is equally necessary that the ideas and memories in the mind be so associated or grouped that one idea will instantly call up many other related ideas. And this can only be done by developing the power of association, how associations are made. And here the practical question arises: how can I train my mind so that the ideas it contains are closely associated each with many others? In attempting to give an intelligible answer to this question, it will first be necessary to discuss briefly something of the process by which associations are formed in the mind. Someone has said, "Thoughts are things." Now, this statement is utterly meaningless unless we have a clear idea of what is meant by the term thing. But let us imagine for a moment that the thing is something concrete, common and physical, like a brick, an ordinary building brick. For a thought can be considered an object, a thing, just as a brick can be studied as an object, a thing. Now, in order to make associations around anything, we must first have a clear idea of that thing. So we must begin by studying our brick, by analyzing it. We will discover that the brick has shape, color, dimensions, length, width, thickness, weight, hardness, roughness, certain utilities and possibilities, history, monetary value, and so on. This process of determining the peculiar qualities of the object or idea is called analysis, and analysis is the first essential step in the formation of associations. for it must be understood that most of the ideas associated with any particular object are based not on that object as a whole, but on some quality or qualities of the object. Having analyzed our brick, we can take some of its qualities and on that basis establish associations between the brick and other objects or ideas. If we take its shape, we will see that it resembles a wooden paving stone, a book, or a cigar box. If we take the usual color of red brick, we will observe that it resembles terracotta, the building material that is a shade often seen in wall coverings and carpets, and also found in the tile stains often used on the roofs of farmhouses. As for the uses of brick, we find that brick can be associated with granite, marble, and other building materials, cobblestones, wood pavers, concrete, and various other substances used for paving, and so on. Now in all this we have gone through 4 distinct processes of reasoning, and without these 4 processes there could be no association between ideas. First we analyzed our brick, then we expanded our ideas about it by trying here and there until we found certain objects that could be associated with the brick. Finally, we observe that all the other objects we think of are either similar to the brick in some particular respect or completely different from it in all respects. We may call these processes extension, similarity, and improbability. Thus, these 4 processes of reasoning, analysis, extension, similarity, and improbability, must be carried out in order to make complete and valuable associations. In the example just given, I chose a brick as an object because the mere fact that it was a simple, prosaic, and common object made my explanation clearer. However, the same process, the same treatment can and, in fact, should be applied to other more complicated ideas. First of all, we analyze the object from all points of view and in all its details and particularities. If it is a concrete object, we study all its qualities as we did in the case of the brick. If it is an idea, we carefully consider all its phases. Then we trace all its relations with other ideas, observing how it resembles or differs from them. Then we have gone through the 4 processes: analysis, extension, similarity, and dissimilarity. I will give you an example that illustrates this interesting and important method. Not long ago, I was one of the guests at a country house. One evening, as several of us were sitting on the porch, our hostess's young daughter came up to me with a plate containing some fine apples and said, "Would you like an apple, doctor?" "My dear, that's a dangerous question to ask a man," I said. "Don't you know that all the sin and misery in the world came because once a woman asked a man to take an apple, and for him she took it?" The little girl laughed and said, "Oh, I know. You mean the apple that Adam took from Eve." Smart girl, I thought. My observation was made without any conscious effort of the mind, without any deliberate effort or action of the will. It was completely subconscious and effortless. I then amused myself by searching for exactly what my mind had done when the girl asked that question, and this is what happened. Analysis. Girl offers apple. From this analysis, I selected the idea of the apple and based my enlargement on it. First I thought of the old adage, tender as the apple of the eye. Then, in quick succession, memories came to mind of the apple that William Tell is said to have shot off his son's head, the golden apples in silver pitchers mentioned in the Bible, the apple of Sodom, the fruit of the other tree which is outwardly beautiful, but is filled with a kind of ash, so it is often used as a symbol of disappointment. The apples of the field of Hesperides, which are said to be guarded by the 4 mystical sisters, the Hesperides, the apple for which Paris ran his race. All of these ideas, found by extension of the original apple idea, were appropriate, but none seemed to fit. Then the story of Eve and her offer of the apple to Adam came to mind. This fitted the occasion exactly, and hence the answer. Here too the processes can easily be followed: analysis, expansion, search for similarities, and discarding of less appropriate or different ideas. And don't forget that in a mind that is even fairly well trained, these images emerge incredibly quickly. I know that in my own mind, as in the case just cited, I often come up with 6 or 7 images and select the one that seems appropriate to mention in the few seconds that normally elapse between an observation and the response to it. In a previous paragraph, I told you that the proper association of ideas practically ensured the power of memory. Let me now try to give you some notion of how this principle of mental activity may be utilized. Let us take a simple example. Epictetus says, "My mind to me is a kingdom." Now, in the first place, let us consider this splendid expression until we fully understand and appreciate it. That is good, but it is not enough. We want to own this phrase, to make it part of our mental stock, so that we can use it at appropriate times in public speaking, writing, or conversation. How do we do that? Well, we actually have 4 ideas in the quote: the mind, a kingdom, implied contentment, and the personality of the man Epictetus who wrote the phrase. Let's first learn something about Epictetus. Let us analyze his character and put a mental image of him in the midst of a network of associations that will make that image of Epictetus ours forever. We find the following points of association: slave, liberated, great philosopher, blameless life, exiled, friend of Hadrian and Marcus Aurelius. So we can associate the image of Epictetus with the following ideas: slaves who were great men, great philosophers who were banished, men of humble origin who became friends of kings, Hadrian and Marcus Aurelius. Any of them will almost certainly suggest to us the idea, the mental image of Epictetus. Let us now return to Epictetus's phrase. The 3 ideas, kingdom, mind, and satisfaction, should be considered for a moment in this way. Kingdom, a place of vast expanse, unlimited resources, unlimited possibilities, infinite powers, much to explore, much to conquer. And for Epictetus, his mind was like a kingdom, and he was content. After the idea of a kingdom of great extent, take up the thought of the mind and its possibilities. Meditate on this until you see how, to a man of intellect, the mind is really a kingdom more interesting and wonderful than any physical country could ever be. Then ponder the notion of contentment in spite of humble circumstances. Associate it with the idea of Zoroaster, Puran Das, Diogenes, Gautama, and Jesus of Nazareth, all of whom were content to live simply, finding their kingdom in mind and soul. "My kingdom is not of this world," Jesus said. Henceforth, any one of these ideas may suggest to us the epigram we are studying, for all of them are now united by the network of associations we have constructed. Now, to work out in this way all the many things that one wants to remember and have instantly at hand seems, of course, very hard work. Fortunately, however, such a method of forming associations, of putting ideas together in bundles or clusters, so to speak, is only necessary until the habit has been formed. Then the matter develops automatically of its own accord. The conscious action becomes unconscious. It is a beneficent law of the mind, and of the body also for that matter, that any act after having been repeated a certain number of times tends to become automatic, to do by itself without any sense of effort, sometimes even without our knowledge. A few months of careful effort will in practically every case develop such a habit of associating suitable ideas that the student will possess without further care or exercise this supreme achievement of the mind, the power of association. It requires both care and attention to form any desirable habit, whether of mind or body. But once the habit is formed, no further care or attention is needed. Learning to write, for example, forming the letters, combining them into words, elaborating the words into sentences and paragraphs, the paragraphs into pages, all take time, several years. However, once thoroughly learned, as in the case of a trained writer, the practice of writing requires no special care or effort. The same is true of association. Few people have it to any great extent. In most, the ideas are separate, isolated. Cardinal Newman says of some, "Navigators now in Europe, now in Asia, see visions of great cities and wild regions. They are in the markets of commerce or in the islands of the south. They behold Pompey's column or the Andes, and nothing they encounter leads them forward or backward to any idea beyond themselves. Nothing has any relation, nothing has any history or promise." All this means, in a word, that these men have no power of association. To arrange our ideas in clusters or groups, we must for a time pay special attention to the matter. As an aid to study along this line, I can recommend the following exercises, which have proved in my own personal experience and in that of others, advised by me to be of the greatest possible value. Take any object you wish: a rose, a pencil, a chair, a wheel, a knife. Once you have selected the object, write a list of its peculiarities. Let's say you have taken a knife, an ordinary table knife. Now describe its shape, color, size, weight, material, and indicate its peculiarities: hard, cold, sharp, heavy, dull, elastic. Once you have written this list of descriptive points, take them one by one and think about what other objects have the same quality. For example, in terms of material, the knife being made of steel with an ivory handle resembles all steel cutlery and steel machinery, differing from them not in material, but perhaps in shape and degree of tempering. The ivory handle suggests a large number of items made of that material. The knife edge suggests lancets, swords, scissors, and so on, and may also be applied figuratively as to the nature of a remark. His words were like a dagger thrust into his soul, or the effect of a glance, an eye like a bayonet thrust into mine, and so on. This treatment of the object knife, if done exhaustively, will prove to be a very valuable exercise. 3 or 4 hours devoted to it will be time well spent. It is not that you are particularly interested in the subject of the knife, its analysis or its relations, but by doing the exercises with any object, you are getting into the habit of treating all subjects in the same analytical way. When you have treated 20 different objects according to this method, you will have made great progress in acquiring the invaluable achievement of associating ideas. Chapter 5. Imagination and how to cultivate it. The mind can create its own substance and its own planets. The universe for man is but a projection of his own inner consciousness. Kant. Of all the faculties of the mind, imagination is the most picturesque and in many ways the most interesting. Without it, the world would be barren. Not only would there be no pictures, no music, no books, but no houses, no bridges, no ocean-going ships, no great enterprises, nothing in fact, for everything that man has made has been conceived first in the imagination before it was born in reality. We cannot think that a person lacks the power of imagination because that is impossible. But many people, I am sorry to say, are very deficient in imagination, and this lack of imagination alone is enough to make them commonplace, uninteresting, and of little use or importance in the world. A man or woman may lack imagination and yet be honest, upright, industrious, and conscientious. But for such a man or woman, the higher rewards of life are hopelessly unattainable. He may be an excellent bookkeeper, but never an accountant, a skillful typist, but never a secretary, a faithful stockboy, but never a salesman. The bookkeeper, the secretary, and the salesman must have imagination. Of course, when it comes to any real creative work, painting, sculpture, musical composition, literature, the power of highly trained, refined, bold, and vivid imagination is the great essential. The creators of famous masterpieces have in some cases lacked everything else except this: imagination. Some of the great artists have lived all their lives in squalor and want. Some have been ignorant. Some have been crass. Some have been immoral. Some have been eccentric. Some have been almost or quite mad. But all have had one thing in common: a proud imagination. In no respect, I believe, do men differ so much as in the power and activity of their faculty, the imagination. Hundreds of men and women have walked and sat in the old country cemetery, and no one had observed anything there that was especially interesting or picturesque. But one day there came to the cemetery a man with a great imagination, a poet. He saw more than grass and trees and gravestones, and he gave to the world the most perfect poem in the English language. His name was Thomas Gray, and the poem was the famous Elegy in a Country Churchyard. Thousands of people had seen an apple fall from a tree to the ground, but one day a man with a great imagination saw the commonplace thing. His imagination took hold of it, and he proposed the theory of Newton's law of gravitation, one of the most important achievements in the entire history of human thought. Another man sees his mother's kettle boiling, observes the steam expanding, and lifts the lid. His great imagination starts from this homely detail and gives the world the steam engine. Napoleon, poor, dark, hungry, wandering the streets of Paris in search of work, dreams of making all of Europe a vast empire, his empire, and almost succeeds. And so we could go on indefinitely. Perhaps it will suffice to repeat that the masters of the world have always possessed a fine and daring imagination, and that without great powers of imagination, no great or important work, whatever its nature, can be accomplished. Imagination is easily cultivated. Perhaps you feel that your own imagination does not always serve you as well as it should. Perhaps you are wishing it were better, that you could produce in it such an improvement as would enable you to create some good and worthy thing in the world. In that case, I am glad to be able to tell you that of all the faculties of the mind, none can be so easily, conveniently, and quickly cultivated as the imagination. And I may observe that, as in the case of other faculties, the means taken to cultivate the imagination will necessarily at the same time train and strengthen the mentality in all other directions. How to develop the imagination? In the first place, it should be understood that the act of imagining, of bringing images to mind, is not a separate function of the mentality, but is closely interwoven with, and in part consists of, several other mental faculties. Therefore, in developing the power of imagination, we must first speak of these other faculties which are actually part of it. If we study an act of imagination, we will see that we must first of all have some material for our image. For most people, the act of imagination means the creation of something totally new. They think that the picture created by the painter, the poet, or the novelist is new in all its details. Now, this is a radical mistake. The artist does not create anything that is entirely new, and this for a good reason. There is not and never will be anything entirely new. Now, as in the days of Solomon, there is nothing new under the sun. You can imagine, for example, a green horse with purple wings. You will say, surely that is a completely new idea. I say, no, it is simply a new combination of four very old and common ideas: a horse, a pair of wings, and the two colors green and purple, and so on with all the creations. However original they may seem, only the combination is new. The combined materials are old as human thought itself. We see then that the first raw material of the imagination is our perceptions, the things we have seen, heard, felt, smelled, and tasted. It hardly seems necessary to state that the better service we have received from our senses and perceptions, the clearer and more vivid will be our power to bring before the mind composite images of those things. The first task, then, of anyone who wishes to develop his power of imagination is to educate the senses. But imagination requires more than mere perception. Things perceived must be remembered. A thing we have forgotten, lost from the conscious mind, cannot be used as material for an act of imagination. And then, the things perceived and remembered must have been grouped and associated in clusters, so that, when one wishes to imagine a certain image, he will have a large amount of material in his mind from which to select the materials for that image. To cultivate the power of imagination, then, we must begin by educating perception, memory, and association. For, and this is my definition of imagination, imagination is nothing more than a combination of perception, memory, and association with initiative and will. This is by no means a textbook, but it will give you a clear idea of the process, as textbooks would probably not do it in such a short time. Some practical exercises. Let me say here that you exercise your imagination all the time, during all your waking hours. You imagine thousands of things every day. Everything you do, all the people you meet, everything you say, all that is in the imagination before it becomes realities. Your imagination gets a lot of exercise, but it's not the right exercise. The mental images are not clear and vivid. How can you make them so? Demand it of yourself, and this brings me to your first practical exercise. Get a good, lively novel, something action-packed and as close to the here and now as possible. Get comfortable and start reading. When you get to the end of the first paragraph, stop and picture before your mind a clear image of what has been expressed or described. Was it a scene? Picture it. Mountains, sea, farm, urban residence, cold, warm, rainy, bright. Try to make it as vivid as it would be if you were contemplating the scene. That's what the writer of the story did, otherwise you wouldn't be reading it. In the next paragraph, the scene changes. Something is added to the image. Notice this. Take your time. It's an exercise. Then comes a person, let's say a man. Notice him. Is he tall, short, dark, light, attractive, repellent? How is he dressed? Force yourself to imagine every detail, and so on for a chapter. By then you will have had enough, but if you have acted conscientiously according to my advice, you will feel an understanding, an interest, and a sympathy for that book and its characters that will surprise you. When you have read a dozen chapters in this way, you will have proved to yourself in many ways that your imagination, and indeed all your mental faculties, have improved markedly. Moreover, you will know for the first time the real pleasure of reading. This is the kind of reading that Emerson had in mind when he said, "There is such a thing as creative reading as well as creative writing." Another method by which you can cultivate the faculty of imagining is as follows. Take 15 or 20 minutes at the end of the day and make a detailed review of your most important events. Take plenty of time. Supply every detail. See and hear again everything that was said and done. Examine each episode critically. What mistakes did you make? How could you have handled the situation more smoothly, advantageously, and diplomatically? How would you act again in similar circumstances? In this exercise, try first to really see clearly and vividly each event, person, action, detail of each episode. Secondly, in imagining how you might have acted yourself and others, be careful not to criticize other people's actions. Try to feel that whatever went wrong, you yourself, if you had possessed sufficient will, sympathy, gentleness, intelligence and control, could have fixed it. Do not try to finish all the events of the day. That would be impossible. When the 15 or 20 minutes are up, stop. This is the method of Pythagoras, who devoted his entire evening to meditate on the events of the day. To develop the power of auditory imagination, the following methods are useful. Remember the words and melody of a well-known song performed by a good singer and imagine how it sounds. Listen to the lyrics. Note the quality of the voice and accompaniment. 3 or 4 songs, or 3 or 4 repetitions of the same song, are enough for once. Invoke in your memory one by one the various sounds of the countryside and listen to them with your imagination. The buzzing of the bees, the sound of the wind, the rustling of the leaves, the cries of the various birds, the mooing of the cattle, and other noises peculiar to country life. Another valuable exercise is the following. Remember some experience from your past that at the time made a strong impression on you. Think about it for yourself and for others. What influence has it had on your life since then? Has it been good, bad? Why? If it is good, can you not repeat the same experience? If it is bad, how can you avoid it? This method should be followed with various experiences, as it is easy to understand. The exercise develops much more than imagination. It teaches reason, judgment, self-control, and that intelligent and thoughtful care of self, which is the middle ground between brutal selfishness and basic self-denial. Another useful exercise is the following. Recall some attractive landscape you have seen. Draw it from memory. Suppose it is a stream in the mountains. Remember the rocks on the bank, the trees with their low branches, the cows knee-deep in the water at midday. Bring to mind the twittering of birds in the foliage, the hoarse caw of crows in the pines not far away, the occasional moo of a cow in the adjoining field. Hear the laughter of children as they plunge at dusk into the cool, still waters of the nearby mill pond. Smell again in your imagination the scent of the earth, the trees, the wildflowers, the freshly cut hay in the nearby meadow. Then begin the creative phase of imagination. First, paint a picture in your mind, let's say a landscape, a view of a high mountain on the right, a large tree on the left, between the two a hillside covered with greenery, beyond it a lake above a blue sky under which the setting sun hangs. Add all the details I don't have space to list. Compose many pictures like this, spending time on each little bush, rock, or cloud. Unless you make the picture vivid and complete, you will lose the real benefit of the exercise. Every picture ever painted has been worked out in this way in the artist's imagination before it was put on canvas. Next, add action to the picture. On the lake is a small sailboat with a merry band. How many of them are there? What do they look like? How are they dressed? Suddenly, a squall arises. The boat capsizes. Another boat comes out from the shore and rescues the unfortunate ones. And so on. One of the most interesting and valuable exercises for the imagination is the following. You are reading a fiction book and have reached, say, the end of the 3rd chapter. Now sit down and write with your imagination a continuation of the story from the point where you stopped reading. Who will marry whom? What new adventures will the characters have? Imagine how the plot will develop. This exercise not only improves your imagination, but also your writing skills and creativity. Practicing these exercises regularly will strengthen your imagination and all your mental faculties, allowing you to create original and valuable works in any field you choose. Write the continuation of the story you are reading. How will the villain be punished? What will become of the adventurous? Write another continuation at the end of the 4th chapter. Do the same at the end of the 5th, 8th, and 10th chapters. Now, in this exercise, although incidental literary practice is very valuable, the main thing is to train the imagination. Therefore, you must think and imagine more than you write, setting out the rest of the story as you imagine it in brief and simple terms, but long enough to be clear. Take plenty of time. It's better to come up with a good, clever sequel in 5 hours than to spend twice that time doing a rushed, blurry, incomplete job. Finally, come up with a complete story. Imagine your hero and, if you want, a heroine. Develop your situation and bring things to a logical end. The best training for the mind, for all other faculties, as well as for the imagination, is not to put the story in writing until it is complete in thought. Some of the most successful story writers follow this method and never put the story down on paper until the imagination has fully worked it out. The best plan is to first block out in the imagination the general plot of the story. He then writes the details without making any special attempt at literary form, but taking care that the description and details are clear and exact. You can then make a second copy, or even a third if you wish, and with each writing try to get a clearer and clearer mental picture of the characters, scenes and events that make up your story. A few hours a week spent in the study of the lines I have outlined here will do wonders not only in cultivating the power of the imagination, but in developing all the desirable qualities of the mind. Chapter 6. How to concentrate attention. Attention makes genius. Wilmot. Genius is nothing but continuous attention. Lord Chesterfield. Attention is the stuff of which memory is made. If I have made any improvement in the sciences, it is due more to patient attention than to anything else. Concentration of attention is one of the master's keys to power. Without it, nothing great or significant can be achieved. The most perfect, the most retentive memory, the boldest and most picturesque imagination. Without concentration, they can do nothing. The principle of concentration can be well illustrated by a physical comparison. Suppose we take a soccer weighing 4 oz and propel it through the air by means of the charge of gunpowder generally used for a projectile weighing 4 oz. What effect will the impact of the ball have? None. But suppose we concentrate the 4 ounces of weight on a lead sphere less than ½ an inch in diameter and apply the same propulsive force to it. What will happen then? The difference between the soccer and the lead bullet is the difference between diffusion and concentration, the difference between harmless and deadly impact. The same is true in the world of thought. Some people's thoughts are like a soccer, large, expanded by the wind of words, slow-moving, ineffective. Other people's thoughts are like bullets, concentrated, fast, direct, going straight to the center without pause or hindrance. "This is the only thing I do," said that profound philosopher, Paul of Tarsus. And if we study the history of the master spirits of the world, we will see that this has been their policy. The uncouth butcher who pushed Charles the Fern from the throne and established a form of government based on moral principles instead of special rights. The pallid little French lawyer who, in the hope of establishing his wild dream of democracy, made the flower of French aristocracy climb the ladder of Dr. Guillotin. The ignorant coppersmith who gave the world perhaps the greatest allegory in profane literature. The Corsican adventurer, plebeian and lowly, who made himself master of the world. All of them had for their motto the idea of concentration. This is what I do. What is meant by concentration of attention? For our purposes, we can use the terms concentration and power of attention as if they meant the same thing. What is concentration? In a word, concentration can be defined as the state of mind in which all the energies of the individual, both physical and mental, are concentrated on what he is doing or thinking. All actions and all thoughts unrelated to what he is doing or thinking are kept out of mind, and all his forces are concentrated on the task at hand. Whoever can do this has concentration, has the power of attention. He who has not this power must acquire it before he can hope to do or be anything admirable or worthy in the world. Anyone who has performed any difficult feat of strength, such as lifting a heavy weight, bodybuilding on the horizontal bar, or trying to make a track record in the 100 yards or the 220, will realize how great a factor in these muscular performances is the mere fact of concentration. In these, as well as in many other physical feats, such as jumping, marksmanship, shot put, etc., the slightest deviation of the mind from the work being performed is absolutely destructive to success. In acrobatic work, such as flying trapeze and flying rings, as well as in juggling and balancing, the same is true. Acrobatic jugglers and gymnasts are always masters of the art of attention, of concentration applied to their special feats. Now, concentration is largely a negative process. It depends as much on what you don't do as on what you do. Take an example. You sit down to write a difficult letter. The streetcar whizzes by with its villainous bang, bang. Suddenly you remember that you should have gone into town to buy the book your wife wanted. But there's the letter. You write another line or two, and suddenly you hear the excited barking of little Fido, the Scottish terrier. You walk over to the window and look out. Nothing happens, just another terrier, not so Scottish, across the street. You reread a few lines of your letter and start again. You don't quite know what to say. Your eyes roam the room. Ah, yes, that suit that needs pressing. You take care of it. Then you go back to your letter, and so on and so forth. Half an hour has passed and the letter has just begun. This is a good example of lack of concentration, of a wandering mind. Such a habit of thought is an absolute hindrance to any achievement that is useful to oneself or to the world at large. How can we overcome this tendency? By what means can we gain the power to put all the faculties of the mind at the service of the task of the moment, without allowing any of our thoughts to wander in other directions? It is very simple but not easy at first. Simply refuse to let the mind wander. Be the master of your mind, of yourself. Remember what Milton says, "He who is master of himself is king of men." But of course, you will want more specific instructions than this. It's easy to say, concentrate, but you need to know exactly how to concentrate. Remembering that attention is nothing more than the act of applying the mind, the whole mind, to the task at hand, you will understand that faithful practice of the various exercises advised in the preceding chapters of this series cannot but be of great value as aids to the development of the power of attention. Every effort of the mind, whether to perceive, remember, associate, imagine, or judge, must necessarily involve a concentration of the faculties of the mind on that particular act, whatever it may be. In the first place, therefore, I can assure you that the practices I have advised you, if you have faithfully followed them, will have greatly increased your power of attention. In fact, such assurance on my part is superfluous because, if you have exercised as I have directed, you yourself will have already noticed a marked change in this direction as well as in others. Do not allow yourself to overlook the fact that whatever mental act you are engaged in, the act of attention is necessarily involved. There is no faculty of the mind in which you have so many opportunities to exercise yourself. Therefore, the first exercise I advise you is to go carefully through all the methods I have detailed in the chapters on perception, memory, association, imagination, and judgment, making a special effort while doing so not to allow the mind to wander for a moment from the task at hand. This alone, if done persistently and conscientiously, will assure you a high degree of this splendid intellectual achievement. One of the best methods I know of for anyone who wants to start at the beginning and learn to concentrate attention is the following. Select some task which, though simple, requires precision and close attention. An addition or multiplication is well suited for this purpose. Devote yourself to this, resolving that until it is finished and verified, you will not allow the mind to assume, or at any rate hold, any other idea or image. While you are adding or multiplying figures, you will suddenly discover that some other idea comes to mind. The ringing of a bell, a fire or an ambulance, a shout in the street, a fight or a fugitive, a thought about the landlady, your tailor, your shopkeeper. This is where you must perform the essential act of trained attention concentration. Close the door to these external thoughts. Go back to your work. For a while, at any rate, you cannot prevent the intrusion of extraneous thoughts. You can, however, resolutely refuse to allow them to remain in the mind. At first, they will come insistently, again and again, knocking at the door of your consciousness. "Let me in, they cry. "Don't worry about those stupid figures. I am more interesting. I am more important to you. You must, you should, you have to think of me. Let me in." But no, says the trained mind. I only do one thing at a time. I can only think of one object at a time, and if I let you into my mind, I can do you and my task no justice. But the stalkers do not retreat so easily. They come back and back with incredible persistence, knock at the door of your mind, insist on intruding, and now and then gain entrance. So, don't worry or fret about them. Don't let them bother or excite you. Don't be discouraged. Just bring your attention back to the original subject of thought. As Dr. William James, professor of psychology at Harvard, said, "The effort of attention is the essential phenomenon of the will." Another exercise for concentrating attention is as follows. Sit comfortably in a quiet room and choose a simple object to observe, such as a burning candle. Look at the flame of the candle and observe all its details: the color, the shape, the movement of the flame, the wax melting. Keep your attention on the flame for a set amount of time, say 5 minutes. Whenever you notice that your mind wanders, gently, without getting angry with yourself, refocus your attention on the flame. Over time, this exercise will significantly improve your ability to concentrate. These exercises, practiced regularly, will develop in you a remarkable power of concentration, allowing you to apply your full attention and energy to whatever task you choose, thus achieving greater efficiency and success in your daily activities. Exercise 1. Anticipation and pleasant expectation. To develop the ability to focus attention, it is helpful to begin with simple exercises that train both mind and body. Anticipation and pleasurable expectation are emotional states that can be harnessed to improve concentration and expressiveness. 1. Preparation. Find a quiet place where you will not be disturbed. Sit comfortably, with your back straight and your feet firmly on the floor. Close your eyes and take several deep breaths to relax. 2. Visualization. Imagine a future event that you are excited about and looking forward to. It could be a meeting with friends, a vacation, a personal accomplishment, etc. Visualize all the details of that event: the place, the people involved, the sounds, the colors, and the emotions you will experience. 3. Concentrate on sensations. As you visualize this event, pay attention to the physical sensations that accompany the anticipation. Do you feel a tingle in your stomach, a smile on your face, a surge of energy? Let these sensations fill your body, keeping your focus on them and on the positive visualization. 4. Maintain. Focus. Hold this visualization and the sensations for at least 5 minutes. Each time your mind wanders, gently bring your attention back to the image and emotions you have created. This exercise not only improves your ability to concentrate, but also teaches you to use positive emotions to focus your mind. 5. Reflection. Open your eyes slowly and reflect on the experience. How do you feel? Did you notice any improvement in your ability to maintain focus? Exercise 2. Counting with variations. Another effective way to train attention is through counting exercises, which challenge your ability to maintain focus and avoid distractions. 1. Counting. Ascending. O start by counting up from 2, adding 3 each time. 2, 5, 8, 8, 11, 14, etc. until you reach 100. O then make variations. Start from 2 and add 6, 7, 9, 13 or 17 each time. For example, 2, 8, 14, 20, 26, etc. or 2, 9, 16, 23, 30, etc. 2. Count down. O start from 100 and count down by subtracting 3, 6, 7, 9, 11, 13, 17 or 19 each time. For example, 100, 97, 94, 91, etc. O make variations such as starting from 100 and subtracting 11 each time. 100, 89, 78, 67, etc. 3. Increasing difficulty. O. As you become more familiar with the exercise, increase the complexity. For example, count from 3 upwards, but subtract 2 every 4th number. O. This variability not only trains concentration, but also mental flexibility and the ability to perform quick mental calculations. Exercise 3. Using flashcards. This exercise uses flashcards to improve concentration and visual memory. 1. Preparation. O. Prepare about 3 dozen 3x5-inch blank cards. O. On one of these cards, write a 4-digit number, for example, 4357. On others, write 4 digits arranged in a square, such as 47 and below that 93. 2. Memory exercise. O. Shuffle the cards face down. Take one, take a quick look at it, and repeat aloud the numbers you saw first in the order they were written, for example, 4357, and then backwards, 7534. O. Do the same with cards containing series of numbers in columns and rows. 3. Increasing complexity. O. As you become more familiar with the cards, increase the number of figures on each card, building up to longer series, such as 12 or 15 individual figures arranged for an addition exercise. 4. Assistance from a helper. O. If possible, ask someone to show you a card for a second and then try to remember and repeat the numbers. O. They can also read aloud a list of words or figures that you will then repeat from memory. Exercise 4. Attention to details. This exercise involves performing every daily action with full and mindful attention, transforming even the most trivial acts into opportunities to train concentration. 1. Perform everyday tasks with mindfulness. O. When tying your shoes, focus fully on each movement, how you cross the laces, how you tighten the knot. O. When walking, pay attention to each step, how your muscles move, how your feet feel as they touch the ground. 2. Develop a pride in the details. O. Make every detail a work of art. Whether wrapping a package or writing a note, do it with the utmost care and attention. O. This mindful approach not only trains concentration, but also improves perception, memory, and association. Conclusion. Concentration is fundamental to the development of all mental faculties. By practicing these exercises regularly, you will not only improve your attention span, but also your memory, perception, association, and imagination. Over time, these practices will become integrated into your daily life, allowing you to approach every task with full and conscious attention, achieving greater success and satisfaction in all your activities. Exercise. 1. Anticipation and pleasant expectation. 1. Preparation. O. Find a quiet place where you will not be disturbed. Sit comfortably, with your back straight and your feet firmly on the floor. O. Close your eyes and take several deep breaths to relax. 2. Visualization. O. Imagine a person you very much want to see. Visualize him or her coming toward you. Think about how you would naturally lean forward to greet them, extending one or both hands and smiling. O. Keep this mental image before your mind. Let your body naturally follow the emotion of anticipation and joy of seeing that person. Let your face express the smile, and let your hands reach forward. 3. Action. O. While holding this mental image, allow your flexible body to show this gesture in facial expression and in a few words of greeting spoken aloud. O. The key is to hold the thought so intensely that for the moment you accept the imagined situation as real and let your body move according to that emotion. Exercise 2. Horror. 1. Preparation. O. Find a quiet place and sit comfortably. O. Close your eyes and breathe deeply to relax. 2. Visualization. O. Imagine you are looking at a dangerous animal, such as a snake if you are a man or a mouse if you are a woman, from which you cannot escape. O. Visualize the scene in detail, the animal moving, its closeness, your inability to escape. 3. Action. O. Allow your body to react naturally to the horror. Imagine how you would recoil in horror, your muscles tensing, your breathing quickening. O. As in the previous exercise, forget the body completely, let it go, and give your full attention to the imagined situation. Exercise 3. Joy. 1. Preparation. O. Find a quiet place and sit comfortably. O. Close your eyes and breathe deeply to relax. 2. Visualization. O. Imagine some situation that awakens in you a state of joy. It can be a reunion with a friend, receiving good news, etc. O. Visualize all the details, the place, the people, the words, the sounds. 3. Action. O. Allow your body to surrender to the feeling of joy. Smile, laugh, wave your arms enthusiastically. O. Let your body express itself freely, following the emotion you have imagined. Exercise 4. Guilt. 1. Preparation. O. Find a quiet place and sit comfortably. O. Close your eyes and breathe deeply to relax. 2. Visualization. O. Imagine that you have committed a crime, for example, a robbery, and you are brought before a judge. O. Visualize the scene in detail, the judge, the court, your guilty plea, and your plea for leniency. 3. Action. O. Allow this thought to permeate your mind and body. Show with gestures and attitude your appreciation for the situation. Lower your head, clasp your hands together, adopt a posture of repentance. O. Speak aloud a few words of apology or plea for mercy, allowing the body to adjust to the emotion of guilt. Exercise 5. Accusation. 1. Preparation. O. Find a quiet place and sit comfortably. O. Close your eyes and breathe deeply to relax. 2. Visualization. O. Imagine that someone has committed a crime against you and you are facing them in court. O. Visualize the scene, the court, the accused person, your posture as you make the accusation. 3. Action. O. Make your accusation if necessary in words, while adopting the attitude appropriate to this emotional state. Point your finger, adopt a firm and confident posture. O. Let your body express the indignation and firmness of your accusation. Exercise 6. Depression. 1. Preparation. O. Find a quiet place and sit comfortably. O. Close your eyes and breathe deeply to relax. 2. Visualization. O. Imagine circumstances such that they produce in you a feeling of depression. It may be a loss, a disappointment, bad news. O. Visualize the scene in detail, allowing the emotion of sadness to wash over you. 3. Action. O. Surrender your body to the emotion of depression. Let your shoulders drop, your head droop, your breathing slow and heavy. Oh, let the body fully express the sadness and depression you have imagined. These exercises, though they may seem unusual, have powerful and far-reaching results. By practicing them faithfully for a week, anyone can test their effectiveness in developing expressiveness and mind-body connection. However, it is essential that the body be upright and fully flexible, which is achieved through persevering practice of the exercises described in the preceding chapters. Chapter 8. The Lost Arts of Childhood. Except ye be converted and become children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 3. For of such is the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 19:14. The more deeply the man of science studies the sayings attributed to Jesus, the seer of Judea, the more impressed he is not only by his brilliant intellect and marvelous oratory, but by his incredible insight into subjects which in his time were unknown to the most lucid thinkers of antiquity. The wisdom of Jesus. In the history of the human race, 2,000 years is not a long time. Before the beginning of the Christian era, great advances had already been made in the lines of philosophical, physical, and cosmological research, far more than all our scholarship has achieved since then. Some of our most startling discoveries are but corroborations of the knowledge of the Brahmins, the Chinese, the Phoenicians, and other ancient peoples who lived thousands of years before the appearance of Jesus of Nazareth, the child and the kingdom of heaven. One of Jesus' most original teachings was that in the study of children we should find the key to the kingdom of heaven. For us adults, who have lived decades accumulating physical, mental, and spiritual crimes, it is necessary to be reborn, to be radically changed in spirit, mind, and body before we can enter the kingdom of heaven, the physical kingdom of peace, rest, and power. Jesus said to his disciples, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven." This means that, in addition to our adult faculties, we must recover the lost arts and faculties of childhood to attain the kingdom of God. The lost arts of childhood. Let us consider some of the physical characteristics of normal childhood. The healthy child is remarkable for his erect body, his glowing face, his clear and powerful voice, the ease and grace of his movements, and his wonderful endurance. These faculties, which are normal in the average healthy child, can be observed in any playground. The healthy child is erect, with the chest high and expanded, the body carried as an erect spine, and the breathing slow and deep. These are the conditions necessary to reproduce the normal tone of voice when singing or speaking. Upright carriage means that the joints and muscles of the body are in their normal mechanical relationship, resulting in quick, graceful, and economical movements, which accounts for the child's endurance. Regaining lost powers. The power to rest is another of the lost arts of childhood. The tired child lies down on the couch or on the floor and rests. The tired adult, on the other hand, often tosses and turns in bed and worries because he cannot sleep, waking up after 8 or more hours as fatigued as when he went to bed. To enter the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of peace, one must be a master in the difficult art of rest. The world is full of people whose most ardent ambition is to succeed in some art, music, painting, acting, writing, yet few succeed. But watch the children. Their performance, from a purely technical point of view, is beyond criticism. It is simply perfect. The moral and spiritual qualities of the child. The child is by nature absolutely truthful, both in the sense of seeing the truth and of telling it, until fear and bad examples seduce him to lie. Michelet, that profound and tender philosopher, said, "No consecrated absurdity of mankind would have survived a generation if man had not silenced the objection of the child." The first lies you were told seemed strange. Soon, however, you learned to lie yourself. You learned the convenience of lying and thus lost your innocence. Only by being born again can you regain the simplicity, trust and tenderness of childhood and enter the kingdom of heaven. The power of the child in the adult. The truly great people on earth are not the most polished by conventional educational methods. They are often loners and derelicts who have starved in garrets and dreamed in hovels. From miserable prison cells they have sent forth thoughts that breathe under the stars. They have conceived thoughts as lofty as the stars themselves. They are those who through great tribulations have been born again, and like little children have entered the kingdom of peace, wisdom, love and power, the mystical kingdom of heaven. If you want to enjoy the best books on metaphysics, personal development or self-help, visit our website laudioteca.com. There you will find all the audiobooks with their corresponding written book, as well as several transformational courses that will help you improve your life in different aspects. Thank you for listening.